My name is Professor Ana Maria Manzanas. I teach American Studies at the University of Salamanca, and I also work on European film and hospitality. Now, in this talk, I discuss Philippe Liorez's Welcome. The film shows a fascinating intersection between migration, borders, hospitality, and its double, hostility. Ever since the European Union eased the inner transit among its members, there is a feeling of increasing borderlessness. Now, this blurring of checkpoints, however, contrasts with an alternative vision of Europe as a fortress against non-members. This is what the young protagonist of the film, Bilal, encounters upon arrival in Calais. The welcome the film announces is never such. Set mostly in Calais, the movie portrays a 17-year-old Kurd's efforts to cross the liquid line that separates him from Dover, Britain, the promised land where his Kurdish sweetheart, Mina, now lives with her family. Compared with the 3 months traveling on foot from Mosul, Iraq, the English Channel does seem like a last and very short stage of the trip. As he arrives in Calais on a winter day, however, he calls his friend Mooc, Mina's brother, to tell him confidently that he will catch a boat and arrive in London the following day. Of course, things are never going to be that easy, as he discovers soon enough when he meets a group of men walking around the port. Now, these first scenes of the movie point at Bilal's absolute ignorance as to the rituals of passage in Europe, and the images around him are indeed very deceiving. Boats constantly crisscross this strip of water. The Eurostar makes a quick dash between the mainland and England. Phone connections are instantaneous. The liquid line just buys the physicality of certain crossers. France and Great Britain have solidified their borders to foreigners at the same time that Europe's inner borders have turned into mere formalities, or at least for now. Now, what Bilal is about to encounter is a section of what critic and philosopher Etienne Balibar terms the Great Wall of Europe. If, as philosopher Henri Lefebvre argues in The Production of Space, and I quote, "Every state is born of violence, and this founding violence is one of the hallmarks of a state. Maintaining the physical and political integrity of a state requires the constant vigilance and policing of its borders." And this is precisely what the movie is going to show. Now, Bilal and the hundreds of refugees that gather in Calais represent a shifting boundary, as Homi Bhabha would put it, that is never going to be admitted to the domestic spaces of France or any European country. They are within the borders of the European Union, yet they do not belong anywhere. Although surrounded by the constant and expedited passage of goods and capital, the men live in utter immobility, harassed, as the movie shows, along a geography of known places, from the harbor to the jungle and makeshift camp. Now, several theoretical concepts are useful to describe the men's situation. The refugees can be seen as the representatives of Agamben's Al-Massacre, Nancy's abandoned being, Christophe's the abject, Butler and Spivak's notion of spectral beings, and Bauman's concept of a disposable. The surplus population that does not fit anywhere. Excuse me. They are just nobody's guests. Now, is there a way out of this? Bilal tries to leave Calais on a truck, and everything runs very smoothly until the truck enters the busy Calais pier, undergoes individual inspection, and migrants have to put plastic bags over their heads in order to foil high-tech sensors, especially designed to detect motion and body heat. The image of the hooded man reveals one of the basic tenets of this era of supermodernity and supermobility. Borders are closed to humans, but not to goods or merchandise. In the midst of the inspection, Bilal has a panic attack and gives the grip away. He is returned to Calais, and this is how swimming across the channel becomes his only option. Now, let's talk about Calais, because the city has turned into an uneasy contact zone where interaction between citizens and non-citizens, a contingent made up of Afghans, Kurds, and Pakistanis, among others, has turned problematic. The latter occupy what we can call the spaces of hostility in the film. They move between the police harassment and the constant aid of French volunteers. Now, these French citizens aiding the migrants have a disruptive effect from the point of view of the police, for they introduce disorder into the segregated spaces of the city, and will concentrate on three specific places of interaction. The first is the pool. Now, seemingly unaware of the invisible lines that divide the town, Bilal shows up at a public pool. Significantly, the pool contains a liquid line that allows contact. It is a synecdochic equivalent of the channel, if a contained and manageable fashion. The colors of the rope Bilal tries to hold on to, white, blue, and red, remind the viewer of the national character of the liquid line he will try to cross later on. A laconic instructor, Simon, agrees to give him 2 swimming lessons. Now, another place is the supermarket. Outside the pool, a space code separates citizens from non-citizens. The movie shows one particular instance in which 2 young men are banned from entering a supermarket by a security guard because the manager claims they upset the customers. So we can say that the supermarket morphs into a checkpoint away from the geopolitical border that replicates similar parameters of detention and selection. While Simon does not interfere, his ex-wife confronts both the manager's xenophobic attitude as well as Simon's indifference. She also reminds the latter of what it means to ban certain groups of people from shops and public spaces and how that has played out in the history of France. Now, in spite of these instances of hostility, Simon invites Bilal and his friend to stay for the night when he sees them walking around on the streets of Calais. Thus, Simon opens his home to the other and extends the gift of hospitality. Hospitality, writes Judith Steele, is by definition a structure that regulates relations between inside and outside. Someone or someone's categorized as outside, as not necessarily by right or legal contract, part of the inside, is temporarily brought within. As a host, Simon remains the master of the house and determines and defines the conditions of hospitality or welcome. Now, this first instance of limited hospitality will change as the movie unfolds, and Simon will finally administer the rituals of an unconditional hospitality, firstly by claiming the youngster as his son, and secondly by replacing him and going to London to meet Bilal's girlfriend. Bilal, indeed, will never leave Simon's life. Hospitality, Steele writes, is more than a legal contract or a verbal agreement, for, she claims, is overlaid with crucial affective elements, and the guest and the host may be utterly changed by the experience. And this is what we see in the movie. But hosting a migrant does not go without consequences. Simon is immediately summoned to the police station for infringing the law that makes it a crime punishable by 5 years in prison and a fine to aid anyone without papers to enter or stay in the country. The police department's detailed report is an instance of a body politic that can be described as a panopticon. Simon's act of private hospitality runs against the state's right to bar the entrance of a contingent deemed threatening. Now, the rationale rests on the state's right to define who constitutes an authorized guest and who does not. The conversation with the police lays down the parameters of hostility on the national stage. Not only is the country inhospitable to the newcomers, but also forces its own citizens to exercise the same kind of hostile reception. Some of these citizens, like Simon's neighbor, have internalized this gatekeeping role as well as the vision of migrants as the object. In a confrontation with Simon, for example, the neighbor claims that immigrants have lies and steal. Migrants not only inhabit the spaces of the object, but are envisioned as the embodiment of the object. Now, Lioré chooses to frame Bilal's escape by juxtaposing the pool lanes and the waters of the English Channel. From the pool, the camera travels to Bilal swimming across the liquid line and finally making out Dover's white cliffs. But this proximity is deceiving, for the channel is striated by national borders and demarcations and is closely policed. When the Royal Navy instructs Bilal to hold his position so that he can be rescued, he turns back and drowns, and we see him no more. The British authorities sent back Bilal's body in a bag. Significantly, Bilal returns the same way he intended to depart from Calais. Now, in his act of responsibility towards the other, Siman ends up becoming the political object. The violence inherent to state-making and state-keeping is directed not only to those who are considered alien others, but also to its own citizens, as if in an autoimmune response. The immune system protects the body against external threats, yet its efficacy hinges on its ability to differentiate between friend and foe. Now, in an autoimmune crisis, however, an organism, and I quote from Derrida, in a quasi-spontaneous and more than suicidal fashion, turns against itself. Now, Derrida has transposed this malfunctioning of the body onto the body politic. In his analysis of autoimmunity, democracy destroys itself from within. And this is precisely the crisis the movie illustrates. Thank you.